left, as the US is already doing in Iraq.
Because the country...
where do we fit into that?
The giant power that has the control or the access to the oil will stay rich.
Yes, relatively to the rest of the world for a while. You're quite right, Peter. Yeah.
But the oil reserves are far more diverse around the globe than what Jeanette's giving credit for. If you look at it in terms of the big oil producers in South America, what's being produced out of, in terms of the Asia Pacific, what's being produced in Europe.
China's growing 10% a year.
Yes,
This is kind of unimaginable. And 10% when you start off with the population base they've got, they're just like the great hungry enzyme.
China's got oil contracts with Iran. Why is President Bush saber-rattling at Iran? Because Iran's oil is not actually going to be susceptible to US control. I think that's a smoke screen like weapons of mass destruction.
Hang on. We're going to take a break. We're going to Cold 97s. It's a track called Oppenheimer. My favourite songs today. All day. Lucky old you. 25 minutes to 10 o'clock. We're talking about peak oil and climate change and overpopulation with a collection of politicians who have a variety of views on it. We were sparked, or our interest in this was sparked by an interview I did on Monday with a fellow called Peter Lloyd, who's been listening to all of this. Peter, g'day.
Hi, Linda.
Well, what do you reckon so far?
Well, Albert Einstein said that common sense is just the collection of prejudices that an individual has acquired by the time he turns 18. And I think Mr. Smith is actually...
He's doctor. Give him the respect he's due.
I think Dr. Smith is expressing conventional common sense, and that is that all of our lives, everyone here in this room, and probably the majority of people who are listening, have actually lived their entire lives during a period when the production of oil has been almost continuously increasing. And so it has become such a beguiling idea that we have an infinite amount of oil to draw on forever. But I'm afraid that such a common sense view is not going to prevail. I was interested in this Mr. Parker's comment about the biofuels, because at the moment, according to our own EECA, we're consuming 196 petajoules a year in transport fuel, and he's talking about a target by 2012 of 2 petajoules a year. Now, if we all buy Toyota Priuses, and I don't quite know how we'd be able to afford that, but if we do, and we all do carpooling, and we all, move a little bit closer to work and reduce our oil consumption by 75%. And then if we increase the amount of our targets by a factor of 10, we still won't actually be able to do it. And this is why I think that it's actually not a matter of just massaging markets and trying to point people in the right direction. I really think we have to have a complete change in the structure of our society so that, for example, instead of driving to work in any form, we're going to have to live close enough to our work so that we can actually walk or cycle most of the time. And driving is going to be an activity that happens only very occasionally. I think that Dr. Smith and the people from United and New Zealand First, unfortunately, they are victims of the fact that they've been brought up on oil all of their lives, and they just don't seem. I'm not trying to disparage them, but I just don't think that they can imagine life when the supply of energy is going to be so dramatically curtailed. The other thing is, I know that renewable energies are probably the great hope. But the trouble is that it takes probably between 20 and 50 years to actually use what remains of the oil and what remains of our current prosperity to actually build up the plant necessary to switch over to a renewable energy future. I mean, you know as well as I do that buying a wind turbine is quite expensive. I'm in the process of putting photovoltaic panels on my roof, and that's also very expensive. If we spread that cost over many years, and that is the years of oil that is left, we'll probably be able to afford it. But if we wait for some sort of financial crisis before we even start making effective changes to our behavior, we won't be able to make it, and we're going to go through a very, very grim period of shortages, power cuts, and just general deprivation because we haven't made the investment in the renewable plant that we absolutely know that we have to make in the future.
All right, David Parker, let me get your response to all of that.
Well, first of all, I don't see it quite that dire, but I agree there's a serious issue. Secondly, I think that New Zealand is very rich in renewable electricity sources. I actually agree that we need to do better on that front. We've now got to the point through the government's greenhouse policies of having wind an affordable technology in New Zealand. It presently is about 1% of our electricity. It can probably go up 15 to 30-fold from there, at least 15-fold, maybe 30. And we need to charge ahead and do more of that. In terms of biofuels, we need to progress on that. So I would say that the three big things are renewable electricity, because I don't actually agree with the underlying philosophy there that the world is short of energy. I think the world may be becoming short of oil, but we're not short of energy. So wind and other renewables, including geothermal, more biofuels, and I think there needs to be much more attention to energy efficiency. And in the transport field, that includes things like stricter rules around what sort of cars can be imported, so that we gradually improve the efficiency of our fleet and encourage the adoption of new technologies like hybrid cars.
Well, how gradual, though?
Well, in terms of the electricity, renewable electricity, I think we need to think about that. I mean, I can't make those comments on the radio, but I think we need to be more aggressive than we are now. I do agree with Dr. Smith's statement earlier that although we're 70% of renewables at the moment, as we speak, there's a new gas plant coming on stream, and next year will be slightly less renewable. We need not to go down that course. We need to, in the future, I'm not saying it was wrong to do that in the past, but in the future we actually need to focus more exclusively on renewables.
I think when Mr. Parker says that we're only short of oil, we're not short of energy, I think a key point was made by Peter Lloyd that we don't have the plant to do the switch over. And to me, that's the big thing, creating...
Well, no, I disagree with that, Peter, because, the likes of New Zealand's steel mill is reliant on electricity and coal, not oil. And most of our energy in industrial processes either comes from heat as a byproduct of things like burning wood, or from electricity.
Yeah, but the plant to create that was using oil to build the plant to take care of it.
I think Peter's making a really important point, and Peter Lloyd made it too, that we have to invest what remains of our fossil fuel in building the structures that we need to capture renewable energy. While fossil fuel is cheap, we've got a once-only opportunity to build the wind turbines, to build the little marine power stations, to build the wood gasification plants, to electrify the rail system, so that we've got an infrastructure that can operate on renewables. Because
every time anyone has any of those ideas, they seem to get bogged down in this country by arguments about how it'll affect the locals, the Resource Management Act and all the rest of it.
Project Aqua was the biggest opportunity this decade for New Zealand to make a major investment in renewable energy. We're talking about 900 megawatts. As a consequence of that project being rejected, and the Meridian made it quite plain yesterday at the Select Committee that was because of the government messing around with the Resource Management Act and the extra laws that were passed, here it was an opportunity to improve the amount of electricity that we produce from renewable sources, and it got rubbished. And for all that the Green Party pushes for wind farms, and they have a role, and we're supportive of that, I think there'll be many that say that a hydroelectric scheme has less visual impact on the environment than the size of wind farm that you're going to need to build to generate the equivalent amount of electricity as Aqua. Aqua was a lost opportunity that has made us more dependent on fossil fuels.
For a start, it wasn't 900, it was 500 megawatts. And if we need to establish the precedent now that in order to feed our greed for energy, which we waste unconscionably, do we destroy the largest braided river in the country by taking 69% of its water out of it altogether into a canal for 60 kilometres?
I absolutely agree with Jeanette here. The idea that just because we're short of energy we have to sacrifice all environmental baselines is wrong.
Didn't say that for a moment.
Well, that's effectively what you were saying. That's what Aqua would have done. Now,
the Waitaki River is the most heavily modified river in New Zealand right now. The idea that Waitaki is a natural river, hang on a moment, it's already got 10 hydro schemes on it.
But hold on a moment. When we have these debates, though, and the debate of Project Aqua is a good example, the fundamental... The rock on which that debate began was because we needed more energy. The rock on which that debate began never included really a debate, although I give Jeanette Fitzsimons the point here. I mean, the Greens tried to to inject this into the debate. But those debates are never about why do we keep using so much energy? Can't we do this a little bit differently? How can we change our lives so that we can be less energy dependent?
Let's test that with the track record. Labor came into government in 2000 and said we're going to have this bold energy efficiency strategy, and they have not gone anywhere near the targets they're in. One of the reasons we're in a pickle with electricity this winter is because the government keeps banking on idealistic notions of energy improvements. And what really happens is this, Linda, is that when you have economic growth, people get an extra computer in the house, and while the computer may be more efficient, and they get an extra TV, and all of that means that the connection between economic growth and electricity consumption grows. We keep idealistically signing up to this notion of efficiency that does not deliver, and that's one of the reasons we're in a pickle. We need to be practical.
Yeah, but also the debate is...
that at least we've got some conservation targets, and they will get tougher, and we've given Jeanette a role to make them tougher.
Yeah, but doesn't this debate need to rise above? Yeah. You know, this is what the government says, and this is what National says, and because coming back to what Peter Lloyd wanted when we spoke to him on Monday, he wanted an inquiry, not a working group of bureaucrats. He wanted an inquiry into this so that we as New Zealanders could participate in a discussion about A, recognising a problem exists, and then B, coming up with some solutions.
And that's why we've recommended a cross-party group so that we don't have this...
But you're not going to get it, are you? Because these guys, the National Party doesn't even accept climate change exists.
No, that's not true. That is quite untrue,
Don Brash
Linda.
said in June last year he needs to be persuaded.
No, what we're saying is that the science is being given a level of certainty that does not stack up. That is, there are far more questions and there is far more uncertainty about the science.
Thomas on climate change.
That's a misrepresentation, David.
No, I went back to the speech in the House last year, and it was in the urgent debate on this. It was in June 20, I think, and what he said was he needed to be persuaded. Well, and while you've got the leader of the major opposition party who needs to be persuaded about something like climate change, you are not going to get cross-party support on any of these issues.
If you're going to go down the road of cross-party support, you cannot deal with the issues of climate change or the issues of peak oil separate from the issues of an energy strategy.
Well, the key thing to me...
Things are all connected in, and we are facing a huge energy crisis in this country around the issue of Maui gas. And because we politicians keep kicking the ball between each other, we have very serious players in the industry like Genesis and Meridian telling Parliament yesterday that unless some hard calls are made soon, in the next 2 years, we will not have the energy to keep the lights on for a function like the Rugby Cup.
But the reality is, Linda, we're not taking this seriously enough. It is really, really urgent. And what Peter talks about, a new lifestyle, that's how we've got to start thinking. Because we're at the bottom of the food chain in terms of the world oil. When it really hits those big countries, we're out of it. Absolutely no communication with anybody. We've got to survive here in New Zealand without them, because we won't have them to support us. So we got to
So as Peter Lloyd said on Monday, all of a sudden, this world that we've thought of as becoming smaller and smaller, it gets bigger and bigger again.
Yes, indeed.
Look, I don't think it is that dire. New Zealand is one of the richest countries in the world when it comes to renewable resources. We've got a low population density. Already 70% of our electricity comes from renewable sources. These problems are solvable in New Zealand, and we will make substantial progress through the National Energy Strategy.
All right. When is the timeline for your National Energy Strategy? The preparation's underway. When do we see it?
It'll see the light of day for public submissions around July. There'll be public submissions through either the internet or turning up at meetings throughout New Zealand.
Can't wait, and I just might. Very nice talking to you. David Parker from the government, Nick Smith from National, Jeanette Fitzsimons from the Greens, Pita Sharples from the Maori Party, and of course Peter Lloyd, who pricked our conscience on all of these issues earlier in the week. It's 12 minutes to 10 o'clock. Time now to catch up with events in Asia, and I caught up with our correspondent in Hong Kong, Phil O'Sullivan, yesterday. Began by asking him for an update on the search for survivors from the deadly mudslide in the Philippines.
The very latest is emerging as a real tale of, as is probably so often the case of these disasters in Asia, a real lack of